Over the years, I've noticed I'm not alone in feeling that there is a clear difference between how the Heartless were designed in Kingdom Hearts 1 compared to how they were designed in Kingdom Hearts 2, and thus I thought it'd be fun to try and figure out why they feel so different, at least to me. I also love designing creatures and monsters, so studying the Heartless is a great exercise to hopefully learn more about their design philosophy. Also, the verses in the title might seem like we're here to crown a winner. We're not. My main aim is just to compare them and see how they differ, okay? Then let's dive in. Now, I assume that anyone who's clicked on this video is already a Kingdom Hearts fan and are well versed with what the differences between a pureblood and an emblemed Heartless is, but I'll still quickly recap it mainly so we're all on the same page, as well as to clarify how I interpret certain aspects of their design. The pureblood Heartless are creatures born from the darkness in people's hearts, and are generally quite beastly in their appearance and movement. They are largely dark-toned, usually completely black, but do occasionally have an additional color or two. They've got yellow beady eyes and lack the famous Heartless insignia. These are dark and vicious creatures originating from the realm of darkness who lurks in the shadow. The emblemed Heartless are supposedly artificially created by Terra Xehanort and the other apprentices, though I've yet to understand how they appear in young Xehanort's time. They come in an array of different colors and designs, usually influenced by the world they inhabit, and thus very often have a much clearer source of inspiration and reference. They bear the iconic Heartless insignia, hence their name, and unlike their pureblood siblings, they release hearts upon their defeat. Whether it's ever properly confirmed or not, either in-game or in interviews, emblemed Heartless, to me at least, often come across as if they're essentially just pureblood Heartless wearing armor. The first time I saw a soldier as a child, I simply thought it was just a taller shadow wearing a suit. Heartless like the power vials, the sea neons, the large bodies, the mushrooms, the magic mages, screwdrivers, etc. all seem to have pureblood heads, with everything else being these extended artificial bodies or armor. You'll also notice that their emblem never directly appears on the parts of their bodies which appear to be originally pureblood, further confirming my thoughts about emblem Heartless being purebloods with clothes, as the purebloods never originally had the emblem to begin with. With the basics out of the way, let's take a look at what unifies all the Heartless across both games before examining how they differ. As I see it, there are two main motifs which are important to be familiar with. The first one is a pattern that is extremely common among the Heartless, namely the zigzag, or that's what I'm choosing to call it. The zigzag pattern is used on quite a lot of Heartless across the two games. Most commonly, it is used as either their mouths or for the outlines of their helmets, but it does feature on their bodies as well, either as an actual pattern or by the way of how something is shaped. I do have a theory for why this pattern is used so frequently, and to explain that, let's quickly consider the Heartless, compared to the fiends found in Square's already well-established property back at the time, Final Fantasy. The enemies in the Final Fantasy games are, in contrast, often far more muted or darker in their colors, a lot sharper in their designs, with more aggressive expressions and body language. The Heartless, on the other hand, are much more colorful, generally softer and a bit sillier, which I assume is a natural result you'll get when trying to come up with monsters to deploy across a bunch of Disney worlds. Characters and monsters can often be broken down to either circles, squares, or triangles. Circles often signify something safe, squares are usually indicative of someone's sternness, and triangles tend to indicate something being dangerous or unpredictable. This little detour is all for me to guess that the usage of the zigzags stems from a desire to further inject some sense of threat and unpredictability across the otherwise round, soft, and colorful Heartless. The second motif, very common among the Heartless, is a swirl. As I see it, the swirls can be divided into two categories: physical swirls and swirls as symbols. Our first ever encounter with any swirl are the Shadow's antennas, which falls into the category of physical swirls. When we meet soldiers, we are introduced to the second category, swirls as symbols, which are featured on the soldier's helmet. The physical swirls are most commonly expressed through their use as antennas for the Heartless, some examples being Bookmaster, Aquatank, the Magic Mages, Fiery Globe, Prison Keeper, Parasite Cage, Strafer, Sea Neon, and plenty of other. The second most common usage of them are as shoe tips for certain Heartless, these being Soldier, Bandit, Luna Bandit, Large Body, and the Graveyard. But the physical swirls aren't limited to just antennas and shoes and can be found expressed in other ways too. Some examples being seen on Land Soldier, Air Soldier, Pirate, Thresholder, the Grim Reaper, and the Blizzard Lord's staff. Swirls as symbols are probably the swirls that are the easiest to notice. They are most frequent on the various Heartless heads and helmets, where they are meant to symbolize eyes. Examples of these are the Soldiers, the Land Soldiers, the Screwdrivers, the Tornado Steps, the Armored Knights, the Defender's main head, the Pirate's right eye, on one of the Chimera's heads, and appearing on top of the Sursko's actual eye. On the hats of the various Mushroom Heartless, there is another pair of swirl symbols, very similar to the eye swirls, though these are of a different design and seem to indicate shadow-esque antennas underneath their hats instead. Now, I said the Heartless mainly just had two motifs, which were important to be acquainted with, but I do believe it's necessary to briefly examine the Heartless eyes as well, as they have a very specific style, which I regard as a core aspect of the Heartless design. One thing that is always true for the Heartless in both Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 is that if the eyes are visible, they're always yellow. Regardless of any final mix recoloring, they always remain yellow. Now their placement and design may occasionally vary, but their color persists. The most common style is that the Heartless have their bright yellow eyes placed directly onto the pureblood part of their bodies. But both games are also no stranger to having the eyes not follow this and have them instead placed directly onto their emblem bodies. Both games also diverge from the usage of plain round yellow eyes, but we'll get further into that later in the video. Having gone over the Heartless's general common traits, let's now dive into how they differ between the two games. A thing I've heard a few times, and something I've often thought myself, is that the Kingdom Hearts 1 Heartless tend to be more abstract than a lot of the designs from Kingdom Hearts 2. And, I don't know. To me, a lot of the designs have a clear source of inspiration. Medieval soldiers and jesters, monkeys, mushrooms, ghosts, wyverns, fish, jellyfish and Atlanteans, mummies, gargoyles and witches, angels and demons, pirates, bandits, reptiles, a behemoth is a behemoth, and I think these two are quite clear in their references. We also have Final Fantasy mages, and pots or barrels overtaken by spiders or scorpions. Of course, not all of these are one-to-one with their source of inspiration, but you can still see what they're based on. The only Heartless that truly makes me go, what the actual fuck, are usually the Purebloods. That's quite unchanged for all the Pureblood designs in later games too. I also have very little clue as to what the fuck a Parasite Cage and a Kurt Sisa is. Or Kurt Sisa is the name of some dude who won a contest, but what exactly is this creature? It's got a cobra head, so that's a reference to a cobra, or more likely Jafar's cobra form, but beyond that, I've got nothing. And the Parasite Cage seemed to reference various organs, I guess? Or at least aim to have that vibe to it. Then there's the Trickmaster, which I have absolutely no clue as to what its inspiration is or what it's even meant to be. And who can forget World of Chaos, which is the ultimate what was going through their heads when they came up with this. I love it. Please never change, you absolute beauty. Both games have Heartlesses that are more or less exactly what they're based on, and both games have ones which makes you scratch your head. So what I believe is one of the actual key differences when discussing their design philosophy is what they're referencing. The new Heartless introduced in Kingdom Hearts 2 are inspired by birds, cars and planes, soldiers, centaurs, bats, bolt towers, magicians, fortune tellers and shamans, candy vendors, cannons, flowers, a musical note, more Final Fantasy mages, fire and ice and sultans, more gargoyles, graveyards and pumpkins, drills and hammers, ghosts and zombies, dogs, bandits, bombs, morning stars, toys, reptiles, reapers and dragons. The Purebloods are once again strange and abstract. There's the Possessor, which is quite self-explanatory. The Thresholder is a bit what the fuck, but still similar to a gargoyle as they are decorative creatures coming alive. Shadowstalker is a stronger Dark Ball, it seems, and the Darkthorn is to me a demonic beast, kind of indicative of what the organization wants to turn the beast into, and also apparently based on Ifrit's design from specifically Final Fantasy X. Prison Keeper falls in line with the Chimera from Kingdom Hearts 1 and the Experiment from Kingdom Hearts 2, as they all three are just strange, mechanical and artificial creations. The Space Paranoid's Heartless, I have no idea what they're referencing, might be something from the movie, I don't remember, but they look digital at least. And then there are these three. The Surveillance Robot, I feel like I understand, yet not. The Tornado Step I can at least see is wearing a hat and a shirt. I just don't know what potentially inspired it. But the Rapid Thruster on the other hand, what is this? What the hell is this? As I'm sure you've noticed, Kingdom Hearts 1's Heartless are for the most part inspired by people, creatures, animals, be they mythical or real, and other forms of life. The big exception being the battleship, though it still has a captain. The Heartless in Kingdom Hearts 2, on the other hand, while still inspired by various creatures, are now far more often based on inanimate objects as well, such as tools, cars, planes, elements, towers, graves and boxes, and I feel it's important to underline that there's a clear difference between the Hot Rod Heartless, that's just a car, and the Pot Spiders, that are inanimate objects being used by living creatures such as a spider, which I just realized have their remaining 4 legs stuck inside the pot? Ugh, poor thing. Due to these new sources of inspiration, we end up with a whole different design language and thus the inclusion of entirely new elements such as wheels and other body parts which occasionally feel somewhat disconnected from the rest of the alive parts of the Heartless. There is the oddity in Kingdom Hearts 1, that is the battleship, but there's far more of it now, with creatures dragging around boxes and pedestals and being connected to stuff which just doesn't feel like a part of their body. Their different sources of inspiration is the big key difference between the two games, at least in my opinion. But there's still plenty of other changes and differences which are also worth looking into, such as a general change in their shape language and the evolution of their motifs. So, to preface a bit, over the years I've felt that Kingdom Hearts 1 Heartless overall has a more humanoid design compared to the ones in Kingdom Hearts 2, which would make sense considering there are different sources of inspiration, but I wanted to actually take a look at how many humanoid Heartless each game has, and while there is a difference, I honestly thought it would be somewhat bigger. Also, when I say humanoid, I tend to mean a Heartless with a head, 2 arms and 2 legs, though I've made some exceptions. For example, the Surge Ghost, which does like 2 legs, but overall still has a very human-like body and shape. Disregarding the bosses for a moment and focusing solely on the grunt enemies, Kingdom Hearts 1 has a total of 45 lesser Heartless, where I consider 27 of them to be humanoid, 16 of them to not be, and the remaining 2 to be debatable. Kingdom Hearts 2, by comparison, has a total of 59 Heartless, where 10 of them are returning ones from either Kingdom Hearts 1 or Chain of Memories, and out of those 59 Heartless, 23 of them are humanoid, 26 are not humanoid, and 10 are debatable. As you can see on this graph, Kingdom Hearts 2 has far more non-humanoid and debatable ones than Kingdom Hearts 1, and the differences only become bigger if we are only comparing Kingdom Hearts 1 Original Heartless with only Kingdom Hearts 2 Original Heartless. Of course, the returning ones obviously are in the game, and thus are a part of shaping the overall feel of it, but it's still interesting to see what type of Heartless was the developers' main focus when coming up with the new designs. Also, before we move on, here's the comparison for the bosses in each game. Overall, they are quite equal, with an almost equal amount of humanoid and non-humanoid ones in each game, and very few in-between ones. As mentioned earlier, the Kingdom Hearts 1 Heartless are generally quite soft. Yes, you could argue that several of the Heartless has got a sort of triangular shape language to them, but overall there's still often a certain softness and roundness to their 3D models. While in Kingdom Hearts 2, many of their models now tend to be a lot slimmer, more angular, sharper, and most of all, spikier. Namely, Gargoyle Knight, Gargoyle Warrior, Morningstar, Surveillance Robot, Land Soldier, Cannon Gun, Strafer, and Armored Knights. But also many more. With the overall designs being a lot spikier, a totally new trend arises, which, as far as I'm concerned, was never employed for the enemies in Kingdom Hearts 1, and that's these stumpy-ass looking legs for several of the new Heartless. And by having such vastly different types of legs compared to what's been done before, naturally caused them to now also be animated somewhat differently too. The pivot to a much spikier design language also seems to have brought with it an entirely new motif, which we very fittingly can refer to as just spikes. The only Heartless in Kingdom Hearts 1 to have anything that resembles this motif are Battleship, Guard Armor, Behemoth, and Stealth Sneak, with the latter two obviously indicating horns rather than solely being just decoration or stand-in for legs. Now looking at the Heartless post Kingdom Hearts 1, we can see it being used far more frequently, akin to a motif. And it seems to have stuck around post Kingdom Hearts 2 when looking at Heartless introduced in, for example, 358 Over 2 Days and Kingdom Hearts 3. On the topic of motifs, let's revisit the swirls and the zigzags for a moment to examine how they're utilized in each of the games and how the motifs, introduced in Kingdom Hearts 1, was further evolved in Kingdom Hearts 2. Outside of symbolizing eyes or antennas, the only other time the swirl symbol appears elsewhere in Kingdom Hearts 1, as far as I can recall, is on the pirate's sword, though still seemingly indicating an eye with the zigzags representing a mouth. In Kingdom Hearts 2, they still largely symbolize eyes, but aren't as often limited to just heads, helmets, and the like. Now they can also be seen on the land soldier's lance, the shaman's staff, the graveyard's grave, the toy soldier's box, and the cannon gun's cannon. The swirls are further evolved beyond just referencing eyes and antennas, and is now also being used as a general pattern, as we can see on the Storm Rider's body, the Prison Keeper's bolts, and the Ground Shaker's legs. Two smaller changes, also worth noting, is that the swirls seen on heads and helmets in Kingdom Hearts 1 tend to be just black, with the red truffle being the odd one out by having blue swirls instead. In Kingdom Hearts 2, they are now mostly just red or yellow, with the Mushroom 13 and the Soldier being the only ones to still have black swirls. Then, to recap the way the zigzags were used in Kingdom Hearts 1, they often come in the form of mouths, patterns, and occasionally as the outline for certain body parts. This way of using the patterns continues into Kingdom Hearts 2, but we can also see it evolve as zigzags pair up with the spikes, now appearing in the form of horns and antennas. Only the Neo Shadow and Ansem's Guardian can be seen having anything akin to this in the first game. I mentioned earlier that both games diverged from the usage of plain round yellow eyes, so let's get into that now. In Kingdom Hearts 1, there's only two Heartless which diverge from their traditional eyes, and those two are Search Ghost and Stealth Sneak. They do still have yellow eyes, but with slightly different use. The Search Ghost uniquely has the swirls on top of its eyeballs, and the Stealth Sneak has these rings on its eyes, a yellow to orange gradient, and is perhaps the only Heartless throughout the whole series to have pupils. Generally, nothing about the Stealth Sneak really feels like it's a Heartless, except for it having the insignia on its chest. You could make the argument that its swirly tail is inspired by the general swirl motif, though it feels a bit different. Anyways, in Kingdom Hearts 2, a sort of new type of eye is introduced. It's similar to the Search Ghost's eyes, but not entirely. These eyes are still yellow, though also a slightly different hue, tend to be completely flat and has swirls on them, though a bit different from how the Search Ghost did it. None of the swirls seem to be exactly the same, and in the case of the Ground Shaker and the Rabbit Dog, the swirls themselves are yellow rather than black as on the others. Earlier in the video I also mentioned that the Heartless emblem never appears directly on the parts of their bodies which seem to be pureblood. This is true for Kingdom Hearts 1, but that rule is broken twice post Kingdom Hearts 1 with Tornado Step, Ice Cube, and Luna Bandit. I must say that I could have sworn I came across more Heartless which broke the rule during my research, but I guess not. Now I must also say that it could be debatable whether or not the aforementioned Heartless actually does have the emblem on their pureblood bodies, considering the colors. In Kingdom Hearts 1, the emblem the Heartlesses that have pureblood heads tend to have their heads be pitch black, while in Kingdom Hearts 2 this is also changed, as they appear on several occasions to be somewhat brighter and to even sometimes be a dark blue or some other color. Speaking of colors, I also tried to see if there were any radical differences between each game's overall color palettes. As you can see for yourself, in Kingdom Hearts 1 the overall palette is dominated by a lot of violet and purple, dark blues and red. Kingdom Hearts 2 has a similar palette, but the greens, orange and yellows get a lot more attention this time around. But if you look at their final mix colors, both games go for a loud, bright and very varied palette. Though I guess Kingdom Hearts 1's final mix palette is slightly darker. Actually, going back and forth between Kingdom Hearts 1 final mix colors and Kingdom Hearts 2 vanilla, it does seem like some of the changes they made for 1FM somewhat influenced their color choices for Kingdom Hearts 2. All in all, the color differences between each game aren't huge, but there's an ever so slightly change I thought was still important to show off. Another hypothesis I had prior to starting this project regarding why the Heartless has such a different vibe to them in each of the games was in regards to how each world handles their Heartlesses. In my mind, Kingdom Hearts 1 excelled at having both world-specific Heartlesses combined with flexible ones. while I remember Kingdom Hearts 2 as often dropping the ball when it came to this task. And now that I've properly looked it over, I find I've somewhat exaggerated this belief. However, there are still 2 worlds in Kingdom Hearts 2 I find just did not at all pull their weight in terms of providing a compelling or fitting gallery of enemies. So to best illustrate how these 2 worlds kind of stick out compared to the rest, let's quickly go through each world from both games, the entire Heartless progression from start to finish, and see how each world present their enemies. Oh, and before we get into it, in case it's not clear, what I mean when I refer to Heartless as flexible are the likes of shadows, soldiers, rapid thrusters, tornado steps, the magic mages, and so on, which aren't specifically bound to just 1 or 2 worlds, but can fit in most of them without ever really feeling out of place. Okay, let's start the world tour. Dive to the Heart and Destiny Islands. We are introduced to the Heartless. The first 2 we meet are the Shadows and Darkside. Dark and menacing creatures setting the tone works wonderfully for the start of the game. In Traverse Town we meet our first Emblem Heartless, which expands the idea of what a Heartless can look like. These don't all appear on the first visit, but in total, the Soldier, Air Soldier, Large Body, and Guard Armor all fit well within the medieval-esque Traverse Town, as they themselves are all kind of medieval looking with attires resembling that of jesters and knights. Wonderland doesn't really introduce or contain any Heartless which feel uniquely Wonderland-like. But the introduction of some of the magic mages as well as your first introduction to one of the mushroom Heartlesses is fitting enough, I suppose. The world would sort of redeem itself in Chain of Memories by introducing the Crescendo and the Creeper plant, which fit the world expertly. But for Kingdom Hearts 1 it does the bare minimum. But I can excuse it as it's so early on and the game is still showing its hands when it comes to what to expect of the Heartless. Olympus Coliseum could potentially be your first introduction to the Red Nocturne, the Blue Rhapsody and the Large Body if you decide to go there before Wonderland, but ultimately it has no original Heartless and it's just a collection of Heartless you've already met in other worlds, except for Red Armor, Stealth Army and the Destroy Behemoth, which are just recolors anyways. Okay, I said I'd do this quickly, so let's speed through this without stopping and explaining why every Heartless onwards fit their worlds. Deep Jungle has monkeys and a chameleon, Agrabah's got bandits and living pots, Atlantica's got fish, jellyfish and Atlanteans, in Halloween Town there's mummies, ghosts and gargoyles, there are pirates in Neverland, and aside from Parasite Cage, I must be honest and say that Monstro kinda fails to provide a fitting gallery of Heartless, though I suppose you could excuse it and just say he devours anything he comes across and thus he just consumes other worlds' Heartless instead. Hollow Bastion is a huge and ominous castle, hosting a gauntlet of fittingly frightening and powerful enemies. And End of the World is an apocalyptic world where heaven and hell collide and thus we have demons and biblical accurate angels serving as our final grunt enemies as we head towards our final confrontation with the game's main villain. The first Heartless we meet in Kingdom Hearts 2 are the Shadow and the Soldier, as we are reintroduced to the enemies while we make our way up the mysterious tower within Twilight Town. They definitely could have had a third entirely new Heartless appear here, but ultimately having just a pair of them is fine. In the now reconquered and much friendlier Hollow Bastion, we are no longer threatened by the vile Heartless which used to reside here, and are instead being targeted by shadows and soldiers as well as some nobodies. Later on, during the assault on Hollow Bastion, much more aggressive and hostile Heartless show up, as well as Kingdom Hearts 1's the Wizard's friendly brother, the Bookmaster. The Land of Dragons Pantheon is fitting for his world, and same goes for the enemy gallery for Beast Castle. And finally, we've reached one of the 2 aforementioned disappointments. Olympus Coliseum, while having one of the better Disney World storylines in Kingdom Hearts 2, great bosses and a really great expansion of the world from the previous game, delivered absolute slop in terms of its enemy roster. While in this world, we are primarily in the underworld, and what are these enemies? The only ones that really have any right to be here at all are the Morningstar, the Hookbats and the Neo Shadows, as well as the flexible ones like Shadows, Soldiers and Large Bodies. But who thought that reintroducing the Crescendo, the Tornado Step and the Creeper plant in the underworld of all places was a fitting idea? And the Minute Bomb, though I like it, is among one of the silliest Kingdom Hearts Heartless in my opinion. It's up there with its children, the Kitty Pots, which I don't really like. And what in Hades' name is one of Santa's rejected toys doing here? However, Ghosts and Hellhounds are a perfect fit for this location. But why does the designs they went with have to look like beta Dream Eaters? As I've stated, the Heartless aren't exactly Final Fantasy monsters. They're softer, generally sillier, and often more colorful. But hell, they don't have to look this goofy! Olympus Coliseum is a quite early world, so I'm not expecting the likes of Endgame Hollow Bastion and End of the World, but I was still hoping for a somewhat more threatening group of foes when venturing through Hades' domain. God damn! The land soldier is also too clumsy and silly for this exact environment, but that one at least could have worked had it been surrounded and supported by a more relevant roster. It's just such a disconnect between the world and its Heartless. There's no synergy here. And I believe this world unfairly clouded my memory, as I felt this was a far more prominent issue throughout Kingdom Hearts 2's worlds. Though I see now it's mainly just this one, and sort of another one we'll soon deal with. Moving on, we have Disney Castle, which only has 4 enemies during its sole visit. Minute Bomb is a much better fit for this environment, and the bolt towers are serviceable. There could have been more, but it's fine. Timeless River also introduces Heartlesses, which fit in well with its style and genre. And Atlantica doesn't have any enemies unless you hate Finny Fun. Agrabah has once again got bandits and additionally fortune tellers, fittingly within the Cave of Wonders. It's also got this strange fire and ice thing going on, which to me for some reason has always made sense, I don't know why, and regardless of that, the elemental lords are certainly inspired by the Sultan, which fit the world well. Halloween Town has its mummies and graves, and its Christmas Town counterpart has its toy soldier, and as I alluded to before, the Drill and Mole fits this environment a lot better as it looks more like a Santa creation than anything you'd see in the underworld. And a rare vendor for once manages to thematically fit the environment it shows up in. I don't mind it in any of the other worlds, I just wanted to applaud it for finally finding a place it belongs. The Dream Eater ghosts are a far cry from the Surge Ghost, but fine, I guess. Overall, the enemy roster is good here as well. I've prolonged this long enough, let's circle back to Port Royal, which is the second big failure in my opinion. It's not as bad as the Underworld, but the Heartless here leaves such a little impression. Part of that could maybe be due to the Heartless, along with Sora and company, not having textures that fit the world's environment at all, as they do get in Halloween Town, which only further creates a massive disconnect. And of course, the Heartless aren't this world's sole threat, as you also fight a bunch of cursed pirates, so they didn't necessarily need to go all out on the designs here. The air pirates return here, which makes sense, but again, because of the texture, they just feel like they don't belong. The cannon gun is cute, but again, none of these feel like they belong here. Especially not a tornado step and a hammerhead, but why are you guys here? Oh, and don't even get me started on this fuck-ass lizard. The only Heartless that thematically and almost visually feel like it belongs is, well, the Grim Reaper boss. Honestly, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial here, but Kingdom Hearts 3 did a way better job for its Heartless for this world. Way better. And to wrap up this world tour, Pride Lands has a few original Heartless which go well with its aesthetics. I don't really feel that the Bolt Tower and the Armored Knight fit here, but plenty of the worlds in both games have its fair share of additional Heartlesses which don't always fit exactly in, so well, whatever. Late game, Kingdom Hearts 1 really shakes things up by deploying Defenders, Wyverns and Wizards across almost all of the worlds. So again, the Bolt Tower and the Armored Knight's inclusion within the Pride Lands is fine. Space Paranoids has these digital looking Heartless, and instead of shoehorning in these other ones, without adjusting them to this radically different environment, they gave them fitting textures. Take note, Port Royal. And lastly, for the world that never was, the only Heartless to dare show up here are the Shadows and the Neo Shadows, as the world is primarily inhabited by nobodies instead. So, having burned through all the worlds and their Heartlesses, I hope you can now see how Olympus Coliseum and Port Royal sticks out quite a bit from the rest. And perhaps you think I'm being a bit biased, that I too easily let Wonderland and Monstro off the hook. And perhaps I am being slightly biased, but as I said, Wonderland is so early on, and at that point in the game much more focused on fleshing out the general flexible Heartlesses, so I don't really feel that the game at that point really needs to delve into world-specific ones so early on. And I'm still standing by that Monstro devouring other worlds' Heartlesses feel in line with how KH presents him as an all-consuming space whale. But the biggest point those two worlds have over the Underworld and Port Royal is that none of the Heartless in Wonderland and Monstro feel like they're working against them. The Crescendo, Rabbit Dog and Trick Ghost just does the Underworld such a massive disservice in my opinion, and the lack of any fitting textures for Port Royal just leads to this huge disconnect. But moving on a bit, something also worth noting is that Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't seem to have the same progression as Kingdom Hearts 1. As we just went through, the first game slowly introduces these quite standard Heartless such as Shadows, Soldiers, Large Bodies and the various Magic Mages, before it begins to present the world-specific ones. Then as we reach the game's two final worlds, we are met with these powerful and terrifying Heartless. Grim Reaper and the Groundshaker are perhaps the only Heartless in late game Kingdom Hearts 2 which feel like they improve upon threat level with their intimidating and spectacle designs, but it's still not on par with endgame Hollow Bastion and End of the World. Ultimately, Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't really have a similar progression. It quickly reintroduces the usual Heartless and quickly begins to show off both new world specific Heartless and new flexible ones. And then it never really crescendos towards the end with a new roster of threatening Heartless. It just kind of continues at the same pace. Though that's probably more the fault of the worlds themselves, rather than the Heartless, as the last few worlds you're most likely to visit before heading into Kingdom Hearts 2's endgame are Halloween Town, Agrabah, Pridelands and Space Paranoids, and none of these really set the stage or crescendo into the endgame that is Twilight Town, and more importantly, the world that never was. Compare these to Halloween Town, Atlantica and especially Neverland in Kingdom Hearts 1 and you'll see a difference. All the worlds from Agrabah and onwards in the first game felt like they were building towards the big showdown at Hollow Bastion. But now we're starting to lean into an entirely different topic, so I digress. One final important note regarding the enemy progression in Kingdom Hearts 2 is that the Heartless perhaps doesn't need to up the ante, as they aren't that game's biggest threat. And once you reach the final world, it's ultimately the nobodies that are tasked with being the final challenge and menace. In that regard, the Heartless aren't alone in escalating the danger and difficulty. Which brings us to the video's final talking point. Combined with everything I've gone over in this video, from different sources of inspiration, the evolution of certain motifs and introductions of new ones, the final big factor as to why the Heartless in Kingdom Hearts 2 overall feel different and as well as less of a threat is of course because the game treats them like a lesser threat. The big bad in Kingdom Hearts 2 are the nobodies, it's Organization 13. The Heartless are still the dominant enemy types you'll face throughout the game, but they're ultimately just treated as fodder while you pursue the real threat. As mentioned, many of the new Heartless introduced are far spikier than anything we ever saw in Kingdom Hearts 1, so it's not like the new Heartless doesn't ooze any ounce of threat. They do! However, a lot of the new ones also seem way goofier than anything we saw in the first game. There are many Heartless in Kingdom Hearts 1 I would call silly, and I love them for their silliness. However, in Kingdom Hearts 2 many of them, to me at least, go beyond being just silly and end up just being very goofy instead. It does kind of seem like that to make the nobodies the bigger and scarier threat, they tone down the Heartless. Of course, I can't prove that, I could be wrong, you could very well disagree with that opinion. But if they did deliberately do that, I don't think making them goofier was the right call. If the point was to differentiate the designs, though there are already plenty of differences, what they should have aimed for was to make the nobodies these ethereal and almost angelic beings, which they kind of did, so no notes there, but then to have the Heartless contrast them, instead of simply making them goofy looking, again not every single one of them, they should have leaned more into their beastly features. Cash in on that devils versus angels sort of contrast. Less goofy, more beast. And so we've reached the end. Those were all the observations and discoveries I've made as to why the Heartless in Kingdom Hearts 2 feel so different. I didn't want to frame this as Kingdom Hearts 1's Heartless being superior to Kingdom Hearts 2's, though I know I have a bias towards Kingdom Hearts 1. I vastly prefer those designs, so those opinions might have seeped into certain parts of the script. But ultimately, the point of this video wasn't to claim that one design was better, it was just meant to examine the differences. In all honesty, Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't do anything wrong with its designs, it expands the definition of what a Heartless design can be, which is exactly what it should do to keep it fresh, discover something new and to avoid stagnation. As I've complained about several things regarding the designs in Kingdom Hearts 2, there are also a lot of things that I do appreciate. There are plenty of designs in Kingdom Hearts 2 and in the games which came after, which I do really love. And we would have never gotten those designs had the team not dared to shake things up and go in a new direction. Hi. This was mainly an exercise for myself to better understand the different feelings I've had towards each game and their Heartlesses, and also to better understand the character design if there is anything you thought I neglected to mention, or something I overlooked, or if there's something in the video you just flat out disagree with, please share that with me. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts and opinions on this matter. I think that's very exciting. And also, if you made it this far, if you're even seeing this part of the video, I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it, and I hope you learned something, found it interesting. I definitely learned a lot, and also thank you if you bothered to watch the whole thing. Now, in a follow-up video to this one, I'm looking to reimagine a lot of the Kingdom Hearts 2 Heartless as if they were designed with the Kingdom Hearts 1 philosophy. And not in a way that I'm trying to like fix them or improve them or make them better, none of that. I'm just like, for the fun of it, trying to see how can I take a lot of these designs and still stick to the core of it, but in a way that they would better fit in with Kingdom Hearts 1. That's what I have planned after this one. That was kind of the main driving force behind this video. That's the video that I wanted to make, and then this was just going to be like a 5 minutes like prelude before I got into that. And then those 5 minutes become 10 minutes, and now it's I think it's 30 minutes. Anyways, that is the next video that I have planned. I have no idea when it's coming out. This is the first video I'm making. It took a while. I have the redesigns done. Yada. Well, who cares? If you made it this far, again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you when I see you. Yeah, take care.